Here's a secret that most do not know. Your players will not remember every dungeon they crawl through, but they will never forget the villain who outsmarted them, scarred them, or made them question everything. Villains are more than just a final boss of sorts. They are reflections, rivals, and narrative engines for your story. They push the story forward, and sometimes even more than the heroes do. Welcome back to this episode of the Bearded Nerd Podcast, your source of storytelling tools, world building wisdom, and all things tabletop. I'm your host, Brian, and today we're talking about how to create TTRPG villains that your players won't just fight, but they'll feel something about it, whether it's love, hate, fear, or even respect. If you're wanting to make your villains memorable and create a capturing character, this episode is for you. So without further ado, let's dive into it. What makes a villain memorable? Forget evil for evil's sake, right? What actually makes a villain? In my opinion, the best villains have 4 components. They are purposeful. They believe in what they're doing. They actually, with their whole heart, believe in that thing, whatever it may be. Second, they're personal. They challenge the party's values or backstories. They're present. They show up before the final fight. They are blips in the story, so to speak. And then they are persistent. They evolve as the campaign does. Let's take a look at Voldemort from Harry Potter, for example. We see Voldemort in pretty much the beginning. They are mentioned as a character, someone, he who shall not be named, and they are essentially believing that they are needed to purge the world of muggles and lowborn and all sorts of mess. They challenge the players, and in this case, the main characters of Harry, Hermione, and Ron. They make other characters in that narrative think about their values, think about what they've gone through, and it makes them have deep reflections. They're also present, right? They show up in several of the books. In fact, if you just take the movies as an example, Voldemort is pretty much in every movie except the third one, which is Prisoner of Azkaban. So they're present before the final fight. And they are persistent. Voldemort is doing everything in his power to rid the world of Harry Potter because Harry is what's stopping him from his goal, so to speak. And we could probably make an argument for Dumbledore, but that's not the point. They are persistent. They evolve as the story evolves. Now, as world builders, game masters, and storytellers, we need to make those villains pop. And we need tools in order to do that. So here are a couple tools that I like to use to make my villains pop. It stems from the 5 W's of world building, the who, what, where, when, why. In this case, I like to focus on the why. That's the first tool, so to speak. I give them a why. Why did they become a villain? Did the world abandon them and therefore they'll want to reshape it? Are the gods cruel and heartless? And do they care about their people, their constituents, so to speak, but more aligned, more appropriate rather, their followers? Do the gods care? And if not, this villain will tear them down piece by piece and eliminate them. So give them a why. Give them a reason for acting this way. Maybe they were noble. Maybe they were good and they had enough of it. Let's use Gore the God Butcher as an example. Gore the God Butcher is considered a supervillain, but is known for his quest to exterminate all the gods. His motivation, rather, comes from a deep-seated anger after losing his daughter, which led him to seek vengeance against the gods for their perceived indifference to his suffering. So that is plenty of motivation. That's a huge why. And it is written beautifully by the authors. So again, give them a why. Second, a great tool to use in your game is foreshadowing and presence. You can utilize rumors, artifacts, or NPCs who once worked for them or for this villain, and let that be a way of kind of giving the players a taste of this villain. Let's go back to the Harry Potter series. Snape was an agent, so to speak, of this individual, Lucius Malfoy, right? These are NPCs that interacted with the Dark Lord, as he is known, and they were affected. There was some sort of effect that occurred, right? So let's look into those things and then let players encounter those effects and let it roll, right? So let's use that. And one thing I like to leverage, for lack of better words, is how they were before they became a villain, right? So let the players encounter those individuals before they met with this villain or this person. From there, I would highly recommend that you use this tool, this third tool, when the villain has been introduced. So you can fix their voice or smile or a calling card, whatever it may be, a trait, so to speak. Have them have a signature trait or phrase. Do this when you have already introduced the players to the concept of this villain, and let these traits be signals to the players, letting them know that, hey, this villain is here and this is the villain, right? So if the villain is trying to reforge the world, you can come up with a phrase like pieces forged in fire, or the world is forged in some sort, whatever the material or ichor of the gods even, right? Kind of borrowing from Gore the God Butcher. You can just kind of give them a trait that announces who they are. Lastly, I highly recommend homebrewing some mechanical flavoring, right? Designing their homebrew or designing their personal traits, rather, is something that's going to make your homebrew world even more immersive. Design fights around their ideology even, right? If you have a villain that's highly manipulative, have that villain leverage spell charms, illusions, or the ability to control the terrain. They want to be in control, so let the fight reflect that. And there's going to be multiple instances of this fight, right? They are a high-level character, and your players should feel like they are in danger. Rather, the characters should feel like they're in danger, but you understand what I'm saying. So make that mechanical flavor reflect the villain. And as a bonus, if the villain has already won and you're starting the campaign in a world where they have won, what does the party need to do to undo that mess? That's a great tool that you can utilize as well. Lastly, I believe that villains should shape the narrative. So, you may or may not agree with me, but if you're listening to this episode, then most likely you agree with me. So, in my opinion, the villain should do 4 things. They should force tough decisions onto your players. They should disrupt comfort zones within the game world. They should challenge the ideologies of your players. And they should be a recurring presence. They're just not punchable finales. In my opinion, they should be make an appearance multiple times throughout the session. And the villain in reality should make your party make a tough decision. Do they abandon the village to pursue the villain and their captains? Do they make your players feel really uncomfortable with a specific ideology, right? Let's say the cleric, who has a grand devotion to their god, is now challenged by the villain who is on a rampage to remove the gods from the pantheon because, like Gore the God Butcher, they are unreliable and, more importantly, they are hypocritical. So that cleric now has not only a decision to make to believe in the villain and follow them, leaving the party, but it puts them in a really uncomfortable position and it challenges that ideology. And again, it goes back to some of the episodes in the recent season, so to speak, where it gives your players this great opportunity to make a decision. They're immersed as their character and they're going to make a decision and make an awesome story. Your job as a villain is to kind of push that dial and see where it goes. Obviously, you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable as real people, but it's a great way to build tension. Now, speaking about building tension, here are 3 ways that you can build tension using a villain, and you can have it escalate according to your needs. The number 1 way that I like to use this tension is by having or planting the seeds rather for the villain to make their grand appearance, whether it's a letter, an artifact, rumors of them coming back, very much like Harry Potter. Have those little things, those little seeds, so to speak, planted so that your players can start uncovering them. From there, certain smaller enemies who believe in their philosophy, these could be cult leaders or cult members, they could be former captains and generals in their army, whatever it may be, they start popping up and they are reflecting the philosophy of the villain. And then lastly, the actual villain shows up, and then it goes back to the roleplay aspect and how they are going to force those tough decisions, make them feel kind of uncomfortable and challenge their ideologies. But again, all those things are cyclical. I do want to caveat something. When I say to disrupt comfort zones, it's, yes, a little bit personal in the regards of you want to make the player character feel uncomfortable, but you also want to establish parts of the world that are not affected by the villain. Maybe think of Rivendell, right? The hidden city, so to speak. This is going to be crucial so that the players have respite. Now, you don't have to add that, but it's a great way for the characters and the players themselves to have a bit of respite from the villain constantly doing crazy stuff. But you want to disrupt comfort zones. You want to make sure that also parts of the world don't feel comfortable, right? Because there is a villain, there's a threat to the way of life. So think about that as well. That is a way you can disrupt comfort zones without disrupting or making your actual players feel uncomfortable. And then lastly, talk to your players. Make sure that all of this is cool with your players. I know that I've spoken about this so many times, but use your session 0 as a way to kind of fish what type of villain they're comfortable with. So if they're okay with like a Voldemort style or a Sauron, so to speak, run with it. If they're not, kind of reshape it and play and / cater to that party member. So that way you're not making people feel uncomfortable and then they leave your table, right? We have to have that balance. Your villain doesn't have to be the strongest in the world, but they should be the one your players think about when they go to bed after the session. They should change the story just by being in it. And that, my friend, is what makes them legendary. Thanks again for listening to the Bearded Nerd Podcast, your source of storytelling tools, world building wisdom, and all things tabletop. If this episode inspired you, share it with your group and leave a review. For villain building worksheets and stat templates, please check out Patreon. It's a great way to support the podcast. And message me your favorite villain twist. I would love to feature it in a future episode. Much love, y'all, and keep gaming.